We are coming up on what I would personally say is one of the biggest game releases of the year, quite possibly the biggest game release of this year so far, and that is the Resident Evil 3 remake. We're under a week away from its release, and there's a lot to go over with the remake, and I want to go over all of the information you need to know before you spend your $60 on the game. As a premium remake, it will be a $60 release, but I think you'll be surprised in thinking that this might be even more worth the purchase than Resident Evil 2, and we'll talk all about why. Now, just to give you guys some insight, it's easy to see why people are so excited for the Resident Evil 3 remake. Not only was Resident Evil 3 a really good game, and we'll talk about the legacy of that game, but we already saw what Capcom is capable of when they're doing a remake of an older Resident Evil title. They do a big budget remake. It's no lazy remake, it's no typical remaster. You really can't even remaster old PlayStation 1 games. You need to remake them ground up, so they're compelling for a 2020 audience, and that's exactly what they did with Resident Evil 2, and it turned out to be a phenomenal game. Fantastic visuals, the great gameplay was retained, and it still retained the essence of what made Resident Evil 2 so good. And now that Capcom, we've seen from them that they are capable of doing a big remake and doing it really, really well. Resident Evil 3, everybody is already inherently sold on it if you did experience the excellence of Resident Evil 2. But what is Resident Evil 3 going to entail? Well, witness the cinematic events of Raccoon City in a completely reimagined Resident Evil 3. This highly demanded follow-up in the 94 million unit selling franchise comes on the heels of the award-winning Resident Evil 2 and completes the Raccoon City story arc. Resident Evil 3 will also include the online 4v1 asymmetric multiplayer experience in Resident Evil Resistance, and that is such an interesting talking point, and we'll get to that in a little bit because that is something that's kind of swept under the radar, but I do want to bring that to the forefront in just a little while. In Resident Evil 3, stars member Jill Valentine, one of the video game's most iconic heroines, flees a city being consumed by zombies and other horrifying creatures. Built with Capcom's proprietary RE engine, Resident Evil 3 uses modernized gameplay to combine action with classic survival horror in vivid high definition. If you know the visual style from Resident Evil 2, it's going to be very reminiscent to Resident Evil 3, that being the remake that is. Playing the demo, a lot of the excellence of Resident Evil 2 and a lot of the specific stylizations with the visuals, that is retained very well in Resident Evil 3. I would even go as far as to say that they've improved some things, but for the general part, it is very, very reminiscent. Jill's harrowing experiences in Resident Evil 3 take place in the nightmarish hours leading up and following the events in Resident Evil 2, so it's kind of interesting in how it actually interplaces the events of both games, shedding a new light on the plight of Raccoon City's residents. Every hope of escape is cut off by another star in the Resident Evil franchise, the towering big organic weapon Nemesis. This brutal yet intelligent monstrosity uses an arsenal of high-powered weaponry to indiscriminately eliminate any surviving star's members in the city, with Jill being his final target. And of course, the involvement of Nemesis is one of the integral parts of Resident Evil 3. Longtime fans of the original game need no introduction to what Nemesis is, but those of you who took your first trip to Raccoon City with last year's Resident Evil 2 might be more familiar with the bioweapon, the big organic weapon. That Nemesis is based off of Tyrant, otherwise known as Mr. X. While Tyrant was sent in by the Umbrella Corporation to eradicate any survivors left in Raccoon City, Nemesis serves a more focused role. Its singular mission is to eliminate any members of the dwindling stars team still in the city, and that includes you, Jill Valentine. Unlike the Tyrant, however, this one, its knack for punching people, Nemesis has some combat enhancement that set it apart from Tyrant, making it a far more deadly foe as a result. Higher intelligence and the ability to use weapons combine to form a monster that can make its own decisions on how to approach any mission and what weapons it will use to achieve those goals. As if it wasn't bad enough for Jill, Nemesis also has incredible healing capabilities, making defeating it virtually impossible. No matter how many times you take Nemesis down, it gets right back up with a tentacle ready to strike. Oh yeah, did we mention the tentacles? Nemesis can send out these slimy appendages to strike targets from a distance or to grab something to pull back towards it, say a member of stars trying to escape its deadly grasp, and that's really going to be your key focus when you encounter Nemesis in the world of Resident Evil 3. Escaping is your best option. However, you decide to approach or run from the creature, you'll have to act fast if you do want to survive against its wrath. And within the game, while Nemesis is going to be the most notable villain encounter, you'll also notice other monstrosities, including hunters. The infamous hunter is just what it says on the tin, a BOW that mercilessly hunts down prey. First introduced in the original Resident Evil, hunters are a mutated reptile, generally known for leaping through the air to deliver a deadly strike using their razor-sharp claws. The hunters released in Raccoon City are less prone to leaping, preferring reptilian movements that make them much harder to pin down. And then you have a lot of other enemies, including the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service, who all serve as their own unique character, and a lot of visceral characters as well, so that's something to be mindful of within the world of RE3. Those are just the enemy encounters, but the key features of Resident Evil 3 obviously extend far beyond that. It's a fan favorite reborn, it's a highly requested title, and it modernizes a classic favorite 20 years after the original release. But honestly, going back and playing the original Resident Evil 3, it's so great to get a remake that's built ground up for the PlayStation 4 and other modern platforms, just because RE3 does show its age a little bit at this point, even though it was really well received back then. Taking a look at its Metacritic score, it's got an 88 on Metacritic and got very, very good reviews. IGN gave it a 9.4 out of 10, GameSpot an 8.8 out of 10. It got great reviews, but you're talking about a game that was released in the late 90s. It is now 2020, and Resident Evil 3 is being modernized, which is great to see. It's up close and personal, and over-the-shoulder camera and modernized control scheme update the 1999 survival horror classic, drawing players into every blood-curdling encounter and horrific scare while they navigate the ruins of Raccoon City. And you're seeing another side of Raccoon City, even though you might think, okay, am I just revisiting Resident Evil 2 again? Is this a lot more of the same? It absolutely isn't. You'll experience another perspective of the once vibrant city's nightmarish outbreak of the virus, a biological weapon developed by Umbrella. Jill's harrowing struggles for survival takes her from the early moments of the outbreak and overlaps with the events depicted in the Resident Evil 2 campaign before arriving at a dramatic conclusion of the Raccoon City saga. So if you ultimately want to see the conclusion of this story arc, you're going to do so within Resident Evil 3. And it's intense action while also retaining that classic survival horror flair. That's what I thought Resident Evil went away from for a very long time. After Resident Evil 4, especially with 5 and 6, it lost its survival horror roots, but if you played Resident Evil 2 and even going back to Resident Evil 7, they're really bringing that survival horror element back, and doubly so within Resident Evil 3. You'll have to overcome chilling encounters in a constant fight for survival that ratchets up the genre-defining horror game's intensity. Nail-biting exploration complements the gripping puzzle solving that fans have come to love. Bone-chilling tension amplified. Resident Evil engine creates a photorealistic apocalyptic setting where grotesque zombies, horrific creatures, and a persistent stalker await around every dark corner. The proprietary engine has fueled a portfolio of acclaimed games, and you're talking about titles such as Resident Evil 2, even Devil May Cry 5, and Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, and that's just Resident Evil 3's campaign, and that is being done really well. If you played Resident Evil 3 back in the day, you might know that it's not the lengthiest game in the world, so that might be a little bit off-putting. If you want to say anything that might deter you from buying the game, it's that the single-player campaign is going to be rather short. However, Capcom has done something great in that they are bundling Resident Evil Resistance with Resident Evil 3. Now, Resident Evil Resistance we had known was going to be this multiplayer Resident Evil experience. Initially, we had thought it was going to be the standalone game, maybe released at a budget price point, and I really don't know how it would have fared that way, but it was told to us that Resident Evil Resistance would in fact be bundled with RE3, so you get another game mode on top of that, and this is very much a different game mode. For the first time in the Resident Evil series, experience tense 4v1 asymmetrical online matches that invite players to craft horrifying challenges for others to overcome. Embodying the series' trademark tense atmosphere and puzzle solving in a new gameplay format, Resident Evil Resistance lets players architect a sadistic experiment or work together to escape as a team. Developed in partnership with Neoboards Entertainment, Resistance brings a new nightmare to life using the high-quality gameplay and remarkable visual fidelity of Capcom's proprietary RE engine. You choose a side when Resident Evil Resistance launches, and then you go. In Resident Evil Resistance, 4 survivors must strategically work together using their respective special abilities to escape a mastermind's watchful eye across a match composed of 3 stages, and those stages will be variety-filled. You've got traps, puzzles, and other horrors. Each of the survivors can use a variety of different tools, weapons, and unique personal skills to help their team overcome the mastermind's challenges and survive the sinister machinations. The mastermind, on the other hand, you're gonna have to plot his or her deadly experiment using a network of security cameras that track the survivors' every move. In addition to remotely manipulating the environment, each of the masterminds uses a deck of cards that summon vicious creatures, set traps, and weaponize security cameras to divide and overpower their test subject. Each mastermind also has his or her own specialties to keep their experiment under control, such as enhancing their monstrous creations, traps, or security cameras. Masterminds who prefer a more personal touch can choose to directly control any zombie in play, or even devastating bioorganic weapons such as the Deadly Tyrant, a first for the Resident Evil franchise. So the playing as a mastermind sounds like a blast, but also as a survivor, it'll be a rather heart-racing experience. Now, this is a gameplay style we've seen before, the 4v1 style of gameplay. I mean, Predator Hunting Grounds is also coming out in April, and it definitely employs that style of game as well. I think with a Resident Evil lair, it can add a lot of possibilities to it, so it'll be interesting to see how this turns out. It's a new strain of survival horror. The online 4v1 asymmetrical multiplayer experience offers both cooperative and competitive gameplay where players can create their own survival horror experience in the Resident Evil universe. You've got unspeakable Umbrella Corporation experiments, participate in gruesome human trials conducted by Umbrella Corporation across various maps on the outskirts of Raccoon City as the T-Virus begins to spread, unleash your inner mastermind, become a notorious Umbrella operative, and push the boundaries of the virus in a variety of insidious experiments. Prevent your test subjects from escaping by using a customizable deck of cards to create a survival horror landscape filled with traps, zombies, and terrifying bioorganic weapons, and survive together or fall one by one. And of course, it's once again built with the RE engine. So Resistance is something that I understand why some people would be skeptical of a Resident Evil multiplayer experience. There haven't been a lot of great ones, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, and the fact of the matter is they're bundling this in with RE3. RE3 is a game that for a lot of people, it sells itself, and the fact they're giving you Resident Evil Resistance on top of that, I think that says a lot about Capcom's MO right now, where they're trying to do a lot of great stuff for the consumer. And also, added to the fact that Resistance is a multiplayer experience, if it was released as a standalone game, how heavy would that population be? With Resident Evil 3 inherently selling itself, Resistance is gonna get a player boost just on that fact alone, so I thought that was a great idea, and that will be out alongside Resident Evil 3 on April 3rd, 2020. Now, the only qualm that you could have is Resident Evil 2 was released in January of 2019. It did end up going on sale pretty quickly. By the end of the year, you could find it for $20, $25, so ultimately, if you got too many games to play, if Resident Evil 3 isn't at the top of your priority list, I could understand why you would want to wait a little bit, wait until it's, at least $30, maybe a little bit less. If you're of that mindset, fine, I'm never going to deter people away from trying to save money. However, if you're excited for Resident Evil 3, there's a lot to be excited for. It was a great game back in '99, and it looks to be even better come April 3rd, 2020. That's going to conclude this video. Sound off with all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, do us a favor and hit the bell icon. This way you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. That's the best way to keep up with all of our uploads, and we usually try to upload 2 videos a day. And with the bell icon hit, you'll be notified whenever we do upload a video. As always, thanks for watching.